Hello and welcome to the BGBL podcast. I'm Adrian, and this is a different sort of episode. Today we aren't going to be having our usual banter and just long rants. Today instead I'm going to be having a bit of an update episode. This is just going to be me. Austin is not here, and I'm just going to be explaining a bit of what's going on behind the scenes and what we're dealing with right now with our brand new podcast. I'm not sure when I'm going to be uploading this, but as of right now, last week I was at my sister's in the US, Texas. And so for that reason, this might be coming out basically in the spot where we were supposed to record, because since I was visiting, I wasn't able to record an episode. So this might be coming out in that slot. And so this, mainly what I want to do with this is I want to explain what's going on and just a bit about the situation of the podcast. So I'm a college student. Very impressive, I know. Very interesting. And Austin, my co-host in the BGBL podcast, is working a full-time job. So we actually have quite a bit of trouble pumping out episodes regularly. We actually stocked up on a couple weeks worth before we even started uploading, and that's what has kept us not behind. But this podcast is meant to be a weekly, not a bi-weekly thing. Well, bi-weekly would mean something else completely. Not a twice per week podcast. That's not the intention that we're having with this. Really, it's just, from my understanding, for the first 6 weeks, Apple Podcasts puts you, which is actually where the majority of the listens come from. Apple Podcast puts you in basically a tab for new podcasts. So it's a lot easier for you to get views. And while we don't have a large amount of views at all at this point in time, we definitely have there's not a single episode that has 0 listens. Also think I was saying views, it's downloads or just listens. So yeah, it's not great. We're not doing brilliantly for a new podcast, but I think we're also not flopping entirely. There's none of our episodes that just have no interaction at all, or most of them tend to be fairly consistent so far. It's not great, but we're going. So yeah, with that being said, I sort of want to also, we've brushed on this definitely multiple times throughout the episodes that we've recorded so far, but I want to explicitly say this podcast, the sort of what we're going for with this podcast is that really just a conversational thing, we're hanging out, chatting, basically. Imagine you're tired after work or after school, or literally just wanting to relax or being bored, and you feel like just hanging out with some people, relaxing. I want this podcast to basically be that. Be a little, here you go, you can hang out with us, we're here for you. We just talk, we chat, we spout a bunch of nonsense about video games, and it's meant to be very much not something that you have to focus on. For example, my introduction to podcasts was probably, one of my first introductions to podcasts would be Myths and Legends, a great podcast. And that's completely storytelling, it's completely narrative, myth and legends. So it's very much mythologies, and it's really good. It's a brilliant podcast, but that's not what I wanted to do. I admittedly do find that podcast very interesting. This was not meant to be that. This is meant to be a podcast where you just tune in to hear a couple people chatting, having a good time, and just, I hope you guys have a good time listening to us and our terrible bullshit. So that's sort of what we intend to do with the podcast. We sort of want this to be very relaxed, very casual, just you can jump in wherever you want and just relax to us talking some smack. Besides that, we haven't been doing very much so far. This podcast is very new, and like, I've said like a lot, I'm sorry. And so, like, what we've done so far is just uploaded on different sites, and we're, like, one of the things that I've been worried about, and, well, not so much worried about, more like thinking about, is growth, because, like I mentioned, we don't get a lot of listens, we get, like, a consistent amount, but, really, I'm not sure how we can, I know, like, from here and there, like, oh, you can buy advertisements here and you can do this there. But like a lot of like what I've also heard is that can only take you so far. What you really want is native advertisement, as in like the person listening shares it with another person that wants to hear something similar. So like you, person listening, whoever you are, just share it with your friend is the idea. And I know like personally, I've always found that fairly complicated because, like, most of my friends, whether it be in real life or online, they might not find the same exact media interesting. We might, like, play games together, like me and Austin, or we might go to class together. But, really, that doesn't exactly signify, like, oh, well, they'll obviously enjoy everything that I have. So I've always felt like that was rather, like, I can understand why somebody would feel weird about sharing that sort of stuff. Especially something like what we're doing, which is very much ranty, and it's weird. It's not very structured at the moment, which is actually one of like the biggest critiques that we have of the podcast so far. This, as if you haven't noticed, this by itself is an entire rant. I've been ranting for 7 minutes straight about like the podcast. So you can see that me and Austin tend to be very opinionated and we talk a lot, which I hope you don't mind. I hope whoever's listening to this is good with that, because I don't see that changing too drastically. The main critique that I got mainly for the first episode with a couple of people that I shared the episode with was that it felt like it wasn't substantial. It didn't have any like directionality to it. It was very much like talking for the sake of talking, which it honestly is. It's a podcast. It's meant to entertain. But I do get that like it feels like kind of not great to just have literally no structure and for it to just be a chaotic mess, which we tried fixing with putting topics. And I think it definitely helped. However, I do also think that that's not enough. I want to, and this might be happening probably not on the next episode when this comes out, but like maybe 2 episodes down the line or something around that time. I want to try doing various segments. I don't exactly know what, but I have a couple ideas. I do want actually basically what the entire podcast is, which is us taking topics about different video games and video game news and just like talking about it and giving our opinion. I want that to be a segment, and I'm totally fine with that being like half of the podcast. But I do want to have like a significant amount of the podcast be actually just something other than that. So one of the ideas that I had is that, well, we like the podcast is basically based around us critiquing our whatever game we're playing at the time, or just any game that we hear of in the media in general. And so like what I'm at right now is I'm thinking it would be interesting because, like I said, a lot of critiquing. It would be good to have the opposite of that. Some constructive criticism and some like, hey, how about we like try fixing this game? Obviously, we're not game developers or anything of the sort, but since we're so opinionated, I think it would be fun to hear us also talk about what can be done better, what we like in video games, and what, like, for us makes a video game good, really. I think that would be, at least from my point of view, pretty interesting. I have a couple other ideas. I don't want to, like, put them all out there without knowing which ones we're going to use and which ones are not, but that one that I mentioned, I'm pretty sure is going to get into the podcast. I hope so, at least. maybe I was thinking also of like I've seen a lot of well, not a lot, but a couple podcasts that do sort of interactive stuff. So like quizzes or games that like they work with an audio format, not video games, of course. So I think that might be possibly something that we could include in some point. Not 100% sure on that one, but definitely could be a thing. Let's see, what else? What else do we have to talk about? One of the things that I mentioned this, I don't know how in depth I went really. I think I probably should have gone a bit more in depth, but like the growth side of the podcast, like getting more listeners and all of that, I'm really not super sure how to go about it. But like my main sources for knowing how to do this stuff is, the internet. So I might go on Reddit and make a thread on that and just have people explain. And like I have been doing some stuff, like we have a Twitter that you should follow, but like really I don't know how we can gain some more traction. I've been looking around on like different sites and forums. I don't really know about the whole advertising thing. I think maybe really, really far down the line, it might be worthwhile, but right now this is just a sinkhole of money, and I want to restrict that to the essentials. And I feel advertising a podcast, especially since we're doing this as a hobby, we're not doing this really, we're not expecting to get paid, even though we have joked about that a couple times. So I think for now at least, we're definitely not going to invest in advertisement. Plus the results of advertising can be at times kind of shifty. So what I was mainly thinking was doing a collaboration of some sort. There's a lot of podcasts that are just starting up. And there are a lot of podcasts that like having guests on, whether to be to interview them or to just chat. And I think that might be what I'm aiming for right now. I haven't found a podcast that okay. I don't want to sound snobby, but our podcast, I take care of it, let's say. I take my time editing it, and I cut out some stuff that hopefully you can't even notice that I cut out. And I move some stuff around. I don't do a lot of like removing like. I say like a lot, for example, instead of Austin actually. And I don't really always remove those. I feel like unless it's like obtrusive, I don't want to remove it because it's meant to be, like I've said multiple times, conversation. In conversations, there are pauses. There are a lot of just natural sounds and things that we do. I don't want it to sound like Chapter 1. Today, we are talking about. That to me is very robotic and it's very, like, it makes me want to fall asleep. It makes me feel like I'm back in high school and I'm listening to a lecture. I want there to be like a natural feel to it. I want there to be a rhythm to the conversation. And for that reason, I like leaving likes and ums in the podcast. I know it can be a bit obtrusive at times, but I think overall it keeps it very well like grounded and stuff. But really what I went so off topic, I'm sorry. But what I'm trying to get at is that like I do take care of the podcast. I edit it and I post it online. I have been trying to, like I said, make it grow better. I have been very much actively like just going at it, really. So I haven't found another podcast that's interested in collaboration. Again, I've been passively looking in different forums, but like not super actively. But I haven't found a good match just yet. I want it to be something, obviously it has to be, well, not obviously, but it should be, in my opinion at least, to some extent related to gaming, because that is the central topic of this podcast. And really, I feel like a lot of the gaming podcasts right now, they aren't bad, but there are a couple of them that I don't want, like, I don't think it would be good for us to be on. it's not like I'm criticizing them, but I think as a guest, there wouldn't be a good chemistry. I don't think we would make a good fit for those. And also, there's like some like other stuff logistically. Like for example, I'm not sure if I would be the one going on the podcast or Austin would be, or sort of a package deal. So I'm not sure how that would work either. It's a bit complicated to find a good like collaboration. If you have any recommendations, hey, I'm all ears. But I'm going to be more actively looking into that, basically, is what the point is. I, right now, not super actively doing that, but I will probably put a bit more time in that. So, hey, if you came from another podcast and are listening to this right now, cool, I found one. Thank you. I appreciate you listening. Really, that was the main things that I wanted to talk about, and above all, like, one of the things that I want to, like, concentrate on is, one, that this is a podcast for fun. It is a podcast for people to just listen to at their leisure and relax to. I don't want this to be super serious. I don't want this to be dry in any way. I do, like, if you have any suggestions for making it have more structure, I would like that. Because I think a large part of entertainment and comedy to some extent is it setting up a situation where entertaining things can happen in. Entertainment doesn't sporadically appear out of nowhere. I think you have to build a frame around it, something to like hold it up, put it on a stage. Right now, we're doing that with critiquing video games, which works decently, but I think there are better things that we could do, really. And truly, like, I wanted this to improve. I think there is room for improvement. I don't want it to just be like all technical stuff. I want us to like actually get down, practice, get better at actually doing a podcast. And hopefully you'll be here however many years or months, I don't know how long this is going to last, later, and you'll see our growth. That would be really a dream come true. Second, I'd like to thank you for listening to this. I really appreciate everyone listening, really. And I also want to like ask, like, I want to know what you guys want from the podcast. Because it's fine for me to be going off and saying this and this and this, and I've heard that and I read that. But really, what matters to me deep down is what the listener wants. Like, I want to know how you think we should improve. Like, you're the reason that we're doing this to some extent. Yeah, that. Also, like, actually contact us. Like, our email is very prominently displayed in the podcast at the bottom in the show notes. That, like, I know everybody always says, oh, send us an email, oh, send us a tweet, follow us on Twitter, whatever. A large part of that is not because I want more followers, I do, fun fact, but it's also because I think something that this podcast dreadfully needs very much is interaction from the listeners. So if you have literally anything to say, if you just want to say hi, if you just want to tell me to go screw myself, whatever, send me an email. I will happily listen to whatever you have to say to me. If you have any critiques, from anything technical to anything just, oh, you said something stupid here, you're very wrong. I love that. I'm very opinionated, so is Austin, and we'd really love to hear that. So, with that being said, you can contact us at thebgbl@gmail.com or on Twitter at BGBL, all uppercase, podcast lowercase. And that's our Twitter and that's our email. I really hope you actually find it in you to send us an email, send us a tweet. And hey, we love you. See you later.